Alright, hello and welcome back to my channel. So, today we're talking about whether or not organic food is actually better for your health. I want to break down this video into 3 different parts. The first part is, does science back up the claim that organic produce actually is good for your health? Then the second part is is organic produce really pesticide free? And then I also want to give you some good and simple health advice that is very basic, but I hope that it will get your brain cells going a little bit. So let's get into it. So today we're talking about whether or not organic food is actually better for your health. That is what a lot of self-proclaimed health gurus tell you out here on the internet, and they make millions and millions of dollars just by selling their products or their classes or their health advice to you. And they seem to have it all figured out. There's always some part of science behind it that nobody else has figured out, just them. And then they often claim their advice, of course for pay, that is based on science that only they know and nobody else knows. So I think you have to be very careful who you follow and who you get your advice from, because you can spend easily hundreds or thousands of dollars on really BS information that doesn't help you at all, and in the worst case even can harm you. What really makes me upset about this is that those people who give you this advice, they know better. They are themselves acclaimed scientists or medical doctors, like Dr. Gundry is a heart surgeon and Dr. Lee used to be a Harvard professor. So they know how to interpret science and they know how to read science, and they just choose not to do it in order to say outlandish things that they know will get more traction and that they know people will follow them, especially like normal people that are not scientists, that just believe them because of their reputation. And that is very, very dangerous and at least not very helpful. And now let's take one of those people, for example, Dr. Lee. He is a scientist just like me, and he knows how to interpret science. He just comes from a different field. And his basic idea that diet is important to health and that it has been undervalued in medicine, in modern medicine, is not wrong. It's not new also, but it's also not wrong, and I agree 100% with that. But he frequently abandons his sense of integrity when he gives those outlandish advices on social media, when he says things like organic produce can starve cancer. Yeah, you heard this right. I'm not making this up. It's outlandish and it's completely wrong. And he's still saying that organic produce can starve cancer. So this is one of the reasons why I started my non-BS science channel, so that you can all make better decisions in your life and you don't have to listen to people who are not giving you science-based information. I am a scientist too. I'm a tenured professor. I graduated students, I publish papers, and I work and serve as a faculty here at a university here in the South. I work in agricultural science my entire life, for more than 20 years. I visited countless farms, organic or non-organic. I talked to many, many growers in my life, here in the United States, but also in other places in the world. And then I also used to be overweight, I used to smoke, I used to drink, and I had terrible eating habits. And I really stopped smoking 6 years ago, almost 7, and then changed all my habits through my entire life, not just my diet. So for me personally, this is a very important topic, because I changed a lot of the things in my personal life to become more healthier than I was even 6 years ago. All right, so let's talk about if organic produce is actually nutrient richer and has more secondary metabolites and is better for your health. So there are really 3 parts to this. So the first part is, some people claim that organic produce has more nutrients than conventional produce. Nutrients. So we're talking about proteins, fats, vitamins, and sugars. And there's really no clear evidence for that. So most produce, it seems that more the fertilizer regime or the soil type or the cultivar, they play a big role in the nutrient richness, but not necessarily the management system, so organic or conventional. So we don't have a lot of evidence for that. The second claim is that organic produce has more secondary metabolites, and that is also what Dr. Lee is saying. And secondary metabolites are phenolic compounds or acids or other compounds that the plant produces, mostly due to external stressors like diseases and pests, for example, but also other stressors like heat stress, etc. And that is partially true. So to his credit, I have to say there is some evidence for increased levels of secondary metabolites in produce that comes out of organic systems, which also would make sense because in organic systems often the plants are under more stress than they are in conventional systems. That usually also shows in the plant size. So often the plant is smaller, it produces less produce, so often the yields are lower than in conventional systems. There's often increased pest and disease pressure. So that kind of like makes sense, and I have to give him credit. The hypothesis is partially true. That is the extent of it. It is not shown in every single study. There are many studies out that compare produce and secondary metabolites from products from conventional versus organic, and not every study shows the same thing. For example, this study on vegetables here shows that there is no difference in secondary metabolites in all three of the vegetables that were studied in conventional and organic systems, and that was a side-by-side study. But then there are also other systems where they found higher secondary metabolites in produce. And that is very normal in science. That is what we call inconclusive body of knowledge. All right, so the body of knowledge are all those studies that are coming together, and it's inconclusive. So that's a very normal thing in science, and that is when you have inconclusive body of knowledge, you need to be very careful with your hypotheses and claims that you make about this topic. And this is where Dr. Lee starts to losing his integrity. And others too, not just Dr. Lee, everyone who says that basically. Because we cannot say that generally organic produce has more secondary metabolites or higher allergic acid than conventional produce. We could just, that is not backed up by science at all. But now there's a third component to this, which is the health component. So is organic produce, let's assume it has higher allergic acid, is it actually helpful and can it starve cancer? So I want you to put on your thinking hats for a minute. What do you think? Do you think organic produce can starve cancer? Of course not. Of course not. Organic produce cannot starve cancer or prevent cancer. It doesn't, and it had never had, and it doesn't have any super magic powers. If you smoke or drink alcohol, or if you're obese, or if you do not exercise, those are things, those are behavioral changes that you can make that will positively impact your health. And diet, of course, is one of those important behavioral changes, and diet is an important component of cancer prevention, but organic produce is not part of that. The National Cancer Institute says 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables each day, with 9 servings recommended for men. That's what you should eat. So I want to put that in perspective. Nothing about organic. I want to put that in perspective. 1 serving is about 150 grams of fruit. So we need to eat at least 750 grams of fruit and vegetables a day. Raise your hands if you do that. Raise your hands if you do 750 grams or more fruit or vegetables a day. I do. But that's what I say. Most people don't. And that's why I say it is really important to eat more plants, but it is not important whether or not they're organic or non-organic. Eat just more fruit and vegetables. It doesn't matter if they're organic or non-organic. So the bottom line is that the scientific community agrees throughout the literature that a lot more studies have to be done before we can draw any conclusions on whether or not organic food impacts your health positively. The scientific community also agrees on that we should eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, whole fruits, at least 750 grams per day, every day. So now, let's talk about the pesticide component. But to talk about the pesticide component, we need to talk a little bit more about what organic production actually means. So organic farming, at least on paper, has a lot more to do with producing food in a more sustainable way than with increased nutritional value. That's not part of the aim of organic farming. Organic farming is aiming to develop a more sustainable farming system that is environmentally friendly and more friendly to the society and the people that work in it. So it's important to note that if you want to sell a product in the United States with an organic label, the farms need to adhere all the rules and regulations that the USDA has implemented. So that's a lot. Usually takes 3 years for a farm to get certified, and then they have to be recertified every year. One of the biggest components of this certification is the avoidance of a range of synthetic substances on a farm. So those are fertilizers and pesticides for the most part that cannot be used, but that are used in other non-organic production systems. But there are also a lot of compounds that can be used and are used in organic production systems. Because they're so limited on the compounds they can use, they often have to refer to less efficient pesticides and disease management methods especially. And there are a lot of non-synthetic, like natural substances that can be used in organic production, but also some synthetic substances can be used. And I just want to give you like a broad overview of what can be and what is used in organic production. Copper products are used to control diseases. Sulfur products are used to control diseases. Boron products for nutrition, ammonium products for nutrition, chloride products with metal components, products that have natural ingredients. All those products can be used and are used in organic systems. It depends what kind of crop and where it is, but often organic growers have to like spray a lot more than a non-conventional grower because they spray substances that are less efficient. So, generally, it can be said that organic produce has less synthetic pesticide residue than non-organic produce. That is true, because they're not using a lot of synthetic pesticides. But is it pesticide free? Or is it like grown without pesticides? No, of course it is not. They're using pesticides, they just use different pesticides. As you can see here, pesticides can also be found in organic produce, less frequent, but they can be found. And not surprisingly, copper is like the one that is by far most common found, because it's also allowed to use. But there are also sometimes not allowed substances that can be found in organic produce, often due to drift or cross-contamination or other things. So the bottom line is organic produce is not produced pesticide-free, and pesticide residues can be found in organic produce as well. And there's no scientific evidence whatsoever that conventionally grown produce makes people sick. That is just a myth. There is no scientific evidence. I would love to show you a paper that shows this, but there's none. There's no paper that shows you that conventionally grown produce makes people sick. That is not true. You can eat conventional produce. So, and that is makes me so upset about this health advice, because that is like telling people they only should buy organic, they should avoid conventional food. That's flat out bad advice, given that most people in America don't eat those 750 grams of fruit and vegetables, and most people in America work on a budget. They don't have money to buy organic food. So that is flat out bad advice. What's good advice? If you want to talk about health has a lot to do with a lot of areas in your life. And, I changed a lot of those during my life. Diet is just one of them. There's smoking, drinking, drugs. There's like this whole thing of like addiction and substances that are really, really bad for your body that you do not want to take. And that is a whole area in itself. And I'm not an expert on that, so I can't really talk about this. There's mental health. There's obesity, there's your stress level, there's financial wealth, there's sleep, there's social integration, there are friendships, there's of course a lot of exercise, and so many other factors that impact your health. Diet is just one of them. So, but if you want to live with a healthier diet, science backs up a very few very simple steps, and they can be very hard to achieve, and you need to really give yourself time. It took me years to get to like a better and healthier diet, and I'm still not 100% there, But general advice, I'm just giving like the 5 points that I would give you, and we can probably talk about this later more in another video. But general advice is eat out of all the food groups, unless you have an allergy or you don't want to eat it out of ethical concerns, and of course don't. But generally I would say the healthiest way is to eat out of all 4 food groups. Eat more plants, at least 750 grams of fruit and vegetables per day. Do that. Eat whole foods, reduce your portions. For most Americans, that's very good advice. And avoid processed foods if you can. I'm very aware that this is hard to achieve, and we can go into detail for each of those step by step. Just my advice is change one thing at a time in your diet, and you always have to remember that you need to like your food. If you change a thing in your diet and you don't like your food, you're not going to stick with it, which means you're not going to make that change. So don't listen to those who try to convince you that organic food is better than conventionally grown produce and you have to eat it. That is bad advice. There's no science, zero science that supports any of that. We will do more of those videos later. Thanks for watching my Zero BS Science channel. Please subscribe if you haven't. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by end of this month. And I'm ending it here, and I see you soon.